Hey everybody, Cindy Daychuck of Queen Bee Creations. Here today with part 5. I know, I can't believe there's been 4. So part 5 of this Jacobean cabinet. Today we're going to be focusing, and I kind of have tried to zoom in as close as I can for you while still keeping some things in the frame here. I'm probably going to be disappearing because if I'm standing up, it's an awkward height. So I'm leaning down to try and at least be in the frame a little bit, but I want to show you today a little bit of the detailing. So I've spent the past hour and a half working on some of the aging of the bottom, and I wanted to save some of this detail at the top, which you haven't seen much of because I've gotten to sit, which has been awesome. I've gotten to sit up until now. But we're going to do a little bit here so that you can see a little bit of what I'm talking about in terms of aging the piece, bringing a little bit of the grunge back, but kind of in keeping with the piece itself. So there are a number of different ways to be able to do this. Obviously, I'm going to be doing one of them. We could do it with some dark wax and just adding some dark wax into the details. This is, remember, last time we had already clear waxed it. It's been buffed, so I could use some dark wax in there and move it around where I want. I could use some glazing, so you can mix up your own dark glaze. You can buy just a glazing medium from your local Home Depot or Lowe's Hardware, whatever your local hardware shop is. It comes clear, and then you simply add the paint color of your choice into it. So if you've got some black or some dark brown, if that's the color you wanted, you could do a navy glazing. You could do a bright turquoise and use that. In which case, usually what you end up doing then is taking a normal paintbrush, kind of slapping it on all over, and then taking a dry and or wet cloth to wipe it back. And you then tend to have it staying in all of the lows. You might get a little bit of the color staying up on the surface depending upon how much you wipe it back, how much you choose to. It's a great look. I've used it many times, but it would be way too heavy for this piece. You'd have too much staying in the lows. And I really want it just to look like some of this has stayed because of age. So I'm going to be using a product from DIY. Which is called Dark and Decrepit. You could use any glazing medium that you have and do exactly the same thing. And if you were using wax, you would use the same technique. All right. Again, you could just paint the wax on all over and then wipe back where you don't want it, but it would be a little bit heavy for the look that we're going for. Here we're just looking for where maybe some dirt has naturally kind of naturally found its way into some of the crevices. And again, because we're keeping it fairly light, too much of that wax or too much of that glazing is totally going to change the look. Doesn't mean it would be a bad look, just isn't the look that I'm going for. And so I wanted to share a little bit about, on some of these old pieces, what's involved in doing a little bit more of the discreet aging. Oh, and before I get started, I'm old. Let me see if I can do this. Can you all see my shoes? Cool new shoes, paint brushes and paint on them, right? Just my holding them up that high is amazing enough. That was the last of my Christmas gifts that just came in through the mail. So thanks, Liz. They're awesome. They fit. They're really comfy. So to get started, let me put on my detail glasses here. We're just going to dip in. Now, I got to tell you, I barely have anything on here. And mostly because as I go into the details, I don't want to get it too heavy. It's going to be tougher for me to get it out. But when we're going here, I like to just kind of dab it and then move it around a little bit. I'm going to say this. Let me. This dries really quickly, so I don't have a lot of time to stop and chat while it's on there. But for this, do not use a good paintbrush. You are probably going to be tossing the little paintbrush that you use afterward. If you can kind of, let me see if I can show you here. See, This is not pretty. It started out pretty. It's not pretty now. But I hang on to these until they get worn down to little nubbins, and then I tend to use those as well because they kind of allow me to kind of drop down into all those little crevices a little bit better. And you need that worn piece, because what we're doing is not really treating the brush very nicely. So please don't use a good brush when you're doing this, because you'll just cry. You're going to destroy it. So it doesn't need anything fancy. This is a little cheapy brush. I tend to buy these in larger packages. You can do it from Michael's. You can do it from, I found, I would say dollar store, because Lord knows I go to dollar stores often for supplies. But those bristles don't tend to hang in there long enough. All right. Or you just end up losing them all over. So it's not worth it for that. So I just do tend to use like some of the packs from Michael's, maybe kids packs, that sort of thing. A couple of things that you'll see that I do have, because my hands end up being full when I'm doing this. I have some wet wipes. If it gets a little too heavy, then I can use these to wipe back while it's still wet, and it just pulls the rest of the medium off. I have a dry cloth as well, because sometimes I'm trying to rub. You will also see me use my finger, so don't overlook it as an awesome tool in helping you be able to blend and to fit a lot of your medium in there. But we're just looking at adding some of this. One of the things that I like to do is I want this to be random. I don't want the wear to be the same throughout. So when I have more of the dark and decrepit, the medium on my brush, then I'll be in some areas where that's what I expect. But I want it to be worn, so I'm not looking for that same even coverage throughout. Now here's my challenge for doing lives. Usually I'm holding that extra brush in my teeth, but that makes talking to y'all a little bit more challenging. So you're going to see me every so often trying to put it in my teeth and then realizing that doesn't work for you, right? So we're not looking for this to be even detailing. None of the aging on a piece would be even. None of the wear would be even. So we don't want that. When I get down to just having a little bit of the product on, then I tend to start rubbing it into some of those areas, like some of the corners of the door that I want to get some of that aging in, but I didn't want a lot, because we're just looking at getting a little bit of that wear happening there. We would look for adding it to some of the hardware. And here you can see it's a little heavier than I want, but I can just wipe back and it just stays in the crevices. So that's what we're looking for from this, is look for those low spots. That's where I'm looking to add. So when it comes to my moldings here, I'm looking at putting it into the creases. And I don't want it all to be super heavy. So I'm just trying to put it on lightly, let it sit down in. Easier to add more than in those little tight spots to try and take any out. So I'm being a little bit more careful in some of those areas and trying to add some of the detailing. I do have a second brush with me, just because I wasn't sure when it came to doing the grapes and the leaves how well my big flattened fat brush was going to do. So I I do have a newer, smaller brush to try and get into some of those crevices if I needed to, if this wasn't working as well for me. If you think that it's a little heavy in some spots, take your wet cloth and you'll be able to wipe a little bit of it back. That was a little heavier than I wanted down in there. Okay, being quiet for a second while I'm doing that. Yeah, this finer brush is going to work better down in there. But you can see this is where patience kicks in. This is going to take a bit of time, especially the more detailed your piece is. And my last big kind of antique vintage piece, the big two-tone gray cabinet, it had a lot of detail. And so I just put a book on tape and off I went and spent time working on that. But here's the thing. First of all, it depends upon what look you're after, right? If you're just wanting to add a little bit of emphasis to some of the detail areas, then go with a glazing or a wax. Just slap it on, wipe it off, and you're good to go. If you're looking at wanting to have this kind of more subtle aging, which is just a tinge more realistic, then it's going to take you more time. You have to decide, one, what's the actual final look that you're after and which technique serves you. But also, you have to think about, what am I doing with this piece? Is this a piece for me? In which case, spend as much time as you want, getting it to be exactly as you want. If it's for resale, and obviously my pieces are for resale, you also have to think about how much time am I investing, and as a result, what's the final cost going to be, right? So there's a reason that that last vintage cabinet that I did is one of my more expensive pieces. Okay, it's not necessarily because the piece itself costs me more, although that's true too, but it's more a reflection of the fact that it took me significantly more hours to finish than a lot of the simpler or smaller pieces did. So you're paying for the time, and you're charging your clients for the time. It's a tougher sell because you get a lot of people that don't understand or don't know, right? They don't know what's involved. They look at the final piece and they don't know that you sat here with a little tiny artist brush painting into all of the crevices, right? In which case then you're going to have greater or lesser degree of success in selling that piece as quickly as you might a less detailed or less involved piece. So again, think about maybe your market, right? If that's the case, what are they willing to pay? What's the price point? Would you be able to complete your piece using the technique that you're after within that kind of the time frame that you need, the hours spent, and remain within that price point? I price my items based on obviously my costs in terms of materials and supplies. I keep track of the woman hours put into it, certainly the cost of any repairs if repairs are needed. So I track all of those things and I base my price that way. So in essence, I use virtually the same formula for every piece. It means some cost more, some cost less, and that's life. The one thing as a result of that, it means that I'm comfortable knowing I am offering the best price. So my pieces don't go on sale. I don't discount. I get a lot of emails about asking for discounts and you know, sharing reasons why and budget constraints and things, I stand firm because I know this is my prices don't have a lot of extraneous, oh, you know, I'm just going to charge more today because I feel like it, or because, oh, I bought a pair of super cool shoes. These were a gift, but I'm not making anybody pay for any of my purchases. I'm charging based on fair, reasonable price, and so I stand firm. If I had a bricks and mortar store, and who knows, I don't now, but who knows, then the prices of each of my pieces would go up because it would also have to reflect the fact that I now have a lot more overcharges. I have a lot more carrying charges. I'm having to pay for, you know, every piece that I sell is paying a piece of the rent, right? So your pricing model has to take those things into account depending upon what you're doing, where you're located, if you have a shop, if you have a store, you know, what's happening with that. But don't fail to charge a reasonable price per hour for the work that you do, but do make sure then if you're doing that, that you are tracking those hours spent. So I have no trouble accounting for just how much time. And certainly if somebody's buying this piece and they go back and they watch the videos, they can see how long it would have taken, right? They're kind of there with some of the process, and you're a little bit more transparent then, and less room to try and snow people if you're inclined to do that. All right, this is awkward angles, but thank goodness there's a lip here that I can lean on to be able to get to this. So what I'm doing now is I'm using the fatter kind of janky brush that I showed you as a little bit more of a blending tool, while I'm using this smaller, thinner brush to be able to get down into the crevices, just so that I don't end up with too much of that dark and decrepit going where I don't want, and to save me trying to remove it. So I'm trying to get a little bit of shadowing happening here under these rails and some of this detail. And now I'll look at adding just a little bit of that aging on some of the bottoms of these, which gives, again, a little bit of a subtle depth to the piece. It ends up looking a little bit more aged and worn in some spots, which is what I was after from the beginning. But again, I mean, some of y'all might be looking going, I am never doing that. That's too involved, too tedious. And as much as a lot of times I am just a let's get it done kind of person, I like seeing the transformation of these pieces. I love taking something from what it was, having a vision in my mind of where it could go, where I want to take it, and seeing that happen, you know, kind of being part of that transformation. That's the fun part for me. Okay. So you see, sometimes I'm using the brush to blend, sometimes I'm using my finger to blend. It's just whatever works with where I'm working at the time. Right. So when you're doing this, you're going to go and you're going to add a little bit of this aging to any of the cracks or crevices. So this piece, it means adding it into all of this detailed molding up there, down all of this molding, all around the posts. You have to be consistent. It doesn't mean that every little crack has exactly the same amount. It just means that you can't ignore an entire section of the piece, because it will end up looking, as much as we painted it to look older, it's going to end up looking way newer than the pieces where you did add some of that detailing. So even on the cracks, I'm adding some in, but I'm not doing it everywhere, right? And when I'm wiping back, it's because I don't want it necessarily on the flat surface. I just want it in down in the lows, down in some of those areas. The exception being maybe some of the corners where I'm putting it on the corner to just darken that edge a little bit, almost as though you've got all of those years and decades of people putting their hand on the corner. So look for places where people would naturally touch it. Here, I can see the faint outline here of where the knob is going to go. So I have added a little bit of this around that area, so that once I put that hardware back on, it's going to extend a little bit further than the hardware. And the hardware itself, you know what, I didn't do anything to the hardware from the beginning, because I wanted to see the piece finished. Sometimes I have a good idea of how a piece is going to look, and I will go out and either pick up some new hardware. If I need to, I will refinish the hardware itself. Maybe I'll clean the hardware, whatever I need to do to get the look that's going to suit the piece once it's done. In this case, this piece had some really cool old drop hardware. And those tend to be pretty expensive to buy. Again, that can bump up your price. I mean, sometimes a single knob runs you $8 to $10 to $15. You're looking at, oh, I'm doing a dresser with 8 knobs. And then people are wondering where that extra $80 overage came from or something. So the hardware can change a look. Because I wanted this to be old, I really needed to make sure that I was going to have hardware that was old. The hardware that was on there was awesome and was in really pretty good shape. So I held off on doing anything to it until I saw where the piece was going to take me, because sometimes my original vision is completely different than what the piece ends up. You know, I start off saying, okay, it's going to be a nice, light, breezy piece. And the next thing you know, I'm adding dark blues or turquoises, and I've taken it to bright and wild. It becomes bohemian. Or I decide, no, it's really dank and dark outside, and I'm tired of winter, and it becomes yellow, right? So sometimes what I originally planned morphs into something else. Sometimes, quite honestly, it's because the idea that I started out with that was in my head, I failed miserably at executing. That the piece just didn't work out that way. And that happens. And in which case, that's when you're just telling yourself, it's just paint. Do something else. Try something else. Go a different direction. So sometimes when you're trying this stuff, don't look for perfect. Just look for, how did that go? What did I learn? What could I do to fix this or to change this up? But know that anybody else that has ever refinished furniture has tons of things that didn't work. And anybody that tells you different than that is not telling you the whole story, because we all have stuff that we're learning as we go, or we see an old piece of furniture. I mean, I'm going on a trip at the end of March. We're going to spend a couple of weeks in Morocco. Awesome. Get to ride camels, sleep in the desert. Going to be cool. But because we fly through Paris, we're going to stop over on Paris on the way home. And quite honestly, I traveled a fair bit, never been to Paris. So we're gonna definitely stop, have a chance to be able to spend some time in Versailles. I'm going to be taking pictures of things there. and of a lot of the furniture. You know I'm going to be coming back with ideas from Paris of some pieces and some looks that I want to try. I'm going to come back from Morocco with pictures of things where all of a sudden I want to do maybe a lot of the bright Moroccan colors on some furniture. Which, cool, I'm excited about that, and that's half the fun for me. My execution of it might not always be exactly what I was hoping for, what I envisioned, and that's okay, right? One, sometimes you learn a completely different technique or a completely different look just by accident, which, you would never have envisioned that otherwise. And so it proved to be a great learning opportunity because you come up with an awesome finish that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And sometimes it's just okay, that didn't work. Let me try something else. What might work better? And you just move on to plan B. And if you don't have a plan B, that's when you make up a plan B, right? So if you're just thinking about starting and trying to paint some furniture, you got a piece in your house that looks a little bit old and tired. Maybe it's in the old traditional browns, and you're looking kind of going, that doesn't really fit with my decor idea, the direction that I'm moving. Then just try. If you're going to be tossing that piece out, I mean, this was, big garbage collection day here, so there was a lot of people tossing out broken or worn furniture, or sometimes I see perfectly good pieces when, usually then I'm telling my husband, no, we need to stop. We have the van. We can pick that up. I can make that pretty. And it's just because they don't have a vision of it. They don't know. It's not the color they want, so they're going to go out and buy something new. I mean, if you're in that kind of scenario and you're not happy with the piece, why not try painting it? Right? The worst thing that happens is you don't like it. But if you're starting with a piece you don't like already, there's really no harm, right? And it's all part of a learning process. And paint can be painted over, right? You can repaint it. You can, if you want, you can sand it back and start again. You can distress it and then just keep adding to it until you get something that you like. Okay? So I think that you guys get the idea of what I'm doing and how much I just kind of keep playing with this. At some point, so I still have, I've kind of aged this side over here. I have not aged that side. I'm not sure from the lighting whether or not you can even see that properly or not, the difference. But I will take some close-up pics when I'm done to show you maybe a little bit close-up some of what we were doing here and adding some of the detail. I'm definitely a day or two away, probably not tomorrow, but on the weekend of getting this baby totally completed, moving some of the furniture that's lining my walls here and getting it staged and getting it photographed. So we're just a couple of days away from you being able to see the top half and the bottom half at the same time. That'll be awesome for you. And I'll recall as well the original picture that I took of when we just moved it into the house when it was in its original dark brown stage, so that you can see the new finish compared to the old finish as well. So you'll have the kind of the before and after to take a look. And definitely I welcome your comments at that time in terms of, was it an improvement? What might you have tried instead? What looks awesome? What doesn't look awesome? I'm cool either way. Just keep it constructive and not just mean. But it's part of how we learn, right? And I welcome your ideas too, because my vision sometimes needs to be updated with other people's visions and other people's thoughts and other people's look. So I definitely appreciate your being here and helping out with any of that. Hopefully you've learned a couple of things along the way that serve you. Certainly I'll have some future projects that I will use some of the other glazing techniques rather than, it's not all done with the fine brush, trust me, that will give you some other options moving forward. I think the next project that you can look forward to that I'll be moving on to fairly soon, next week, is the cradle that you saw just hanging out in the back behind this piece in a couple of the earlier videos. So once I get this baby moved out of the living room, I'm going to move the other one in. And in particular, I'll show you, because it's going to be a simple paint technique, so it's just going to be pretty much one color. What I will show you on that are some of the moldings that I'm going to add. So it's the details that I'm going to add and some of the hand painting that's going to go with that. So I'll give you a closer look at that. So if you have some plain pieces at home that you're looking at dressing up a little bit, you want to add some detail and some moldings, make it a little bit more interesting to start with, because it didn't start with all this beautiful existing molding. I'll show you how to do that. I'll show you how you can use some paper clay and some molds to be able to dress up any piece that you have, and how easy that is. So we'll do that on the cradle, and that'll be our next project together. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you got some great tips, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And now you can at least see a little bit more of my head.